Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time that you're watching this around the world. And thank you to everybody who is watching this in the future as well. I'm Jack. Over on the other side, over there is Ben, where we're just two blokes who like to rave and ramble about anything comic books, sci-fi, movies, you name it, we do it all. Maybe even do poetry one day, who knows? But this is going to be on a subject which is very near and dear to our hearts, and it goes perfectly with our childhood as well. As you know, I feel like we pretty much lived in the golden age of what I think is the golden age of video games. So we had the whole PS1 era, we had PS2, we also had GameCube, Nintendo, the Game Boy. Does anybody remember the Game Boy, or are we a bit too old? But anyway, for this one, we wanted to just go through like some of our favorite consoles, good memories of the games, and also maybe even the death of video games and the death of variety. As for me, I've always been a PlayStation lover. Don't hate me. I know Xbox is always gaining popularity and so on, and I think Ben's especially an Xbox player. I think. Have you always been? Have you always been like a whole Xbox loyalist?
I mean, the thing is, I've had a variety of consoles over the years. I didn't have an awful lot growing up just because my father wasn't an overly huge fan of games consoles. Don't ask why. But I had a large variety of stuff growing up. I mean, the first ever console I technically owned, and I still have it to this day, I don't know where it is in the cupboard, but it's a Game Boy Advance. That was
Oh,
my love of everything. If it was a long car journey, I would make sure it was fully charged. You had the car adapter as well, but did it work? Did it
yeah,
fudge?
like the proper 2D games when you had like the grey cartridges, if you remember.
Oh, yes. And you had to sort of give it. I'm trying to think of the right wording of this before it sounds dodgy, but you have to give it a good blow before it played because there was so much dust
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
cartridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to use it kind of like a harmonica, technically, because there was so much dust and crap that just clogged up the game that it wouldn't connect. But I had Monsters Inc. because there was the movie came
I
out
had Monsters
around
Inc.
it.
Well, yeah.
I had Scooby Doo and the Mystery Inc. with Monster Mansion. I think it was either Haunted Mansion or Monster Mansion, one of the two. And oh, what else did I? There was something else I had, and I can't remember for the love of money what it was, but it wasn't like a very well known game. It was like a very random generic Nintendo thing just to lure you in. But that was one thing I used to love for hours on end. It would just keep me happy going in the car journey. Just the
No, except it was back then. Like you could only really play it in the daytime because they, for some reason, hadn't put in the technology to where it could actually emit its own light. Because if when it got dark, you couldn't see the screen whatsoever.
yeah,
So there was like an add-on where you had to buy literally a flashlight, where you had to literally buy a torch that's like went into it, which like was held on top for you so you could see it, but the glare meant you couldn't even see the screen. But you know, it was just like, I don't know, it was just magical like back then with all the different consoles we had.
I mean, the thing is, Nintendo is literally the grandfather of all game consoles because everything they came up with first, we're slowly getting better adaptations of it as the time goes by.
Yeah.
Like, there was the Nintendo Power Glove back in the sort of mid 80s. That was this clunky behemoth of a thing
Yeah.
that was meant to be like interactive gaming without a console. It was like strapped to you there. It was like a low budget Infinity Gauntlet that Nintendo basically made. And
Yeah.
while it had a great concept, it didn't really work because the gaming was so laggy it couldn't cope with it, I think, is what the main issue was.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even going back to like the different companies which existed back then, I remember when Sega was still a thing, which obviously Sega, Sonic, you know, THQ, I remember as well. There was so many. I think it was, what's it called, Atari, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like a vast variety of video game companies, but now we've kind of got a very small number of them. I mean, you still got, I think Naughty Dog is still going, who did the Uncharted games. You got
Mhm.
Ubisoft, who is like synonymous with Assassin's Creed. And it just seems now where as we go into well, it's only seemed to sort of pick up steam in like the 2010s, around like 2007, I think, when the PlayStation 3 came out. Whereas I think PlayStation 3 had a good variety of
Mhm.
games. Just I'm using that as just an example. But then as we've got more consoles, the less games and the less variety we seem to have. When it seems to be all about the Grand Theft Autos, the Call of Duties, and the online. So I don't really see much variety these days anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of big console games seem to have the same concept of games that are only available to said consoles. Like, all of the FIFA stuff is either just PlayStation or Xbox, and there is hundreds upon hundreds of the flipping things. It's the same sort of game.
Yeah,
I don't understand how they've conned these kids into buying the same game every sorting year.
I don't know. It's like even with Call of Duty as well. I have never ever I have never seen the hype around it. I don't know if it's just because it's something I'm not interested in, but I've never seen the appeal unless, I'm a wrestling fan. So, like the WWE 2K games, I love because obviously being a wrestling fan, there's multiple different variations, but it's actually something different every year. But whereas Call of Duty seems to be like the same, just kind of recycled stuff. I'm sorry if there's any Call of Duty players out there. I freaking hate the games. I hate the franchise. But, it just back then we had all these different games which were coming out, especially like on PS2 when we had like I remember back then where it wasn't just synonymous just with one single console. Back then, whenever a game would come out, you can guarantee it'd be released on PlayStation,
Yeah.
Xbox, be probably released on the Wii. Does anybody
Yeah.
still have a Wii? It was sorry, I just realized that was a joke within a pun. So but you can guarantee like these were released on nearly every single console, like the DS and like my partner D, who like obviously Ben knows, like she still has her DS, which is incredible. And I just remember there were so many video games companies like Capcom, like everybody remembers Capcom, surely.
Yeah.
Activision, which did the Spider-Man games as well, I believe. Sega, Atari, Nintendo, Warner Brothers. When we had like even Looney Tunes back in action, I remember that game. But yeah,
I,
I just feel like we had a certain magic back then.
I think it's mostly down to the fact that because so many companies are owned by so many other people, it's got to the point where I think there's only maybe three big companies these days that pretty much run the majority of the world. Like, you think of how much Disney owns, and you realize how little choice we have in terms of like their sort of style of products, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen Disney's net worth? It's something stupendous. I think it's
It's
like,
in the trillions at least.
yeah, I think it's pretty much on the same level as Apple.
It's got to be amongst that somewhere along the line, but it's one of those things where gaming has evolved. I'd say at least the past 10 years a lot faster than it has prior any other time in its history.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing some research today to try and just figure out when, say, PlayStation 1 came out because it was a big hit in the 90s. Turned out that it came out in 1995, so it's about 25 years old. Quarter of a century, PlayStation's been around,
So it's
and
pretty much
yet
the same age as me.
I'd say better Nick than you, but there we go.
Yeah, like it probably still works a lot better. I'm not working as well anymore.
Well, to be fair, at least the parts are cheaper. And
I will turn this stream off.
but the thing is like Sony's been around for so many years doing lots of different things, but it's the PlayStation market that I think changed it the most. Because Sony's always been in the game of entertainment, whether it be music, whether it be TV, whatever. But it's the gaming market that they seem to have grabbed hold of so quick. When you think of the fact that they had released PlayStation 4 and then barely a year later there was PlayStation 5?
Well, I don't think it was that short a time, but it's just I just don't. I would never go out to spend my money on a brand new console that's just come out, especially if it's worth like £599 or something like that. I would always do that thing where I would wait till the next console came out so the prices would drop for the previous one. Because I'm like, can you call PlayStation 2 retro gaming now? Can you call it retro?
I would suppose so. I mean, it is what, early 2000 that PlayStation 2 came out.
2001, I think, or it
Yeah,
might be a bit earlier.
so it's still it is sort of retro gaming to a degree because that's only like 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the variety of games that I had, and like I still have, like Jurassic Park, Operation Genesis will always be my favorite game. And for me, being a retro gamer, it beats Jurassic Park. What's it called? Like Jurassic World, I think, where you got, but like this one, you could just build your own park straight away. You don't have to go for missions or any of that crap. And plus, you know, like you had Ratchet and Clank, you had Spyro. Yeah, the X-Men the X-Men franchises, X-Men Legends, I remember, which was a really good game. Yeah, like the old Grand Theft Autos, which like had a certain like magic back then. Like even though the graphics back then like don't even compare to the graphics which we have now. What I prefer about the games back then is not so much about the graphics, it's about the entertainment, it's about what the games were, and it's recapturing that kind of magic from when I was younger. And I just will always play the PS2 for as long as it can keep going. I will keep playing it. And I've only gotten as far up to the PS3, and I've not had another console since.
I mean, the thing is, growing up, I remember I used to go to an after-school club, which is kind of like just a club thing that parents shimmy their kids off when they couldn't be bothered to look after them, pretty much. It's the British way. But the one thing I used to love without a doubt was that they had a Sega console and it had Sonic the Hedgehog on. I used to love playing that if I ever got the chance. But the thing is with this console, I don't know if it was this specific one or whether it was just the fact that it was the console entirely, but anybody were to jump like near it within like a foot or so, it would crash the game and you'd have to start again. Yeah. And it's so irritating because what it was is that the disk drive was so cheaply made, the whole console, that it would just basically take one little jiggle and it would all go.
Yeah, or like there was always the whole anticipation of a game working as well. Like you'd put the disc into the PlayStation 2, put the lid down, start the console up again, and then it does that. We see the towers and everything like that, and then it just fades down into oblivion, and then you got to wait to see if the PlayStation 2 logo comes up. If it doesn't, you know the game's not working.
Yeah,
you would just sit there in anticipation, and suddenly you go, "Oh, thank God, it's working." You know?
But I think the main thing I used to hate with a passion, though, is how easily the discs got scratched. Because if you had a scratched disc, you were completely screwed. There was no way you could fix it. You had to get a brand new one, and you'd be lucky if you could find one in your local shop or even online.
Although there was a hack which my stepdad actually found out, which there's a hack which you can do. I don't really recommend it, but at the same time, it did work whenever I used it. A little bit of washing up liquid and just use your fingers, just go around on like the bottom of the disc and then clean it off quite thoroughly. And honestly, it worked every single time if I had like a glitchy disc or whatever.
How bizarre. I never knew that.
I used that hack and I still use it to this day.
How odd.
I know.
I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of video games, the main things about video games was that if there was a big blockbuster movie, there was at least 3 or 4 different variations of the same goddamn thing.
Any movie, any series, you can guarantee there's a game being made from it.
Yeah. Case in point, the Harry Potter ones. I owned pretty much all of the PC versions of that, because at the time I only had a PC.
Was there... I don't know, they must have released on PS2, or am I thinking of PS1? Like Harry Potter?
They had the first one on PlayStation 1, because I think it was towards when the second movie came out, is when PlayStation 2 was out. And the annoying thing is that I never understood was that the PlayStation variant was so much different to the PC version.
Yeah.
Which I always found really weird, because you would...
Back then, PC gaming wasn't really a thing like it is now.
Well, I think the thing is, back then, obviously, PCs were more designed and built to be just a generic thing that you did your taxes on, or your shopping, or the World Wide Web. It wasn't built for gaming. But as technology has stupidly increased in the past 20 years, considering that we got like iPhones and everything else in between, the tech that we can have for gaming for PCs is just monumentally crazy. But again, it's one of these things where I wouldn't really want a gaming PC because they're so much more expensive to run,
Yeah.
but then they are easier to try and fix. I suppose it's a hard line to walk.
But then again, it's kind of like the magic for me was like, back in the day when, like, pretty much you can guarantee what, because it's not so easy now. Like, it's very rare to find these, but you could put for PS2, you could pretty much have cheats for any game. And I remember back then having like reams of A4 paper with cheats for like all different games, and these sheets be like a mile long. And like we saw like the birth of Final Fantasy and all that, God of War. I remember Diablo, Metal Gear Solid, the Bully game, which it was just called the Bully game. It wasn't really all that much. And then you had Silent Hill. And I'm just like going through like some of the magic and like Gran Turismo as well. Oh my goodness. Dragon Quest, does anybody remember?
God.
Devil May Cry, Ratchet and Clank. Oh, the variety. Looney Tunes back in action is like a good example. Well, actually, for like graphics, everything weren't all that good, but I didn't care about the graphics. I actually play these games still because I love them because they're just so much fun.
I mean, the thing is, I still have somewhere the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man game. It was it was the easiest cheat code to get everything unlocked. It was Mary Jane Watson was the code. I always remember it off by heart to unlock everything. I maxed out every single possibility you could. And then I think I always went for like the Scarlet Spider suit because I just always found it really funky. But it was just like it was so simple to just do all these like random modifications without having to do too much.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of modern day gaming, while you can modify them and do these really cool things, you have to pay to get that done. And again, it's one of these things where it's not changing it to make it more interesting half the time. It's more about just making it look more easy for you.
Yeah,
Which sort of
whereas us, like whereas like what me and Ben had, like we didn't have to worry about paying or anything like that. All you had to do was just a quick search on the internet, and then you got your cheats bang, and off you go. It was really that easy, you know, and just I don't know why. It was just like right, I'm gonna put when you like go on Grand Theft Auto or whatever, right, I'm gonna play without cheats, and then 5 minutes later just going, right, what was that code again?
That's the one thing I used to hate about cheat codes, though, is the fact that it took so long to type. I cannot stand it trying to rifle through with a little joystick like this, trying to type. It's
the Jurassic Park Operation Genesis cheats. I remember off by heart, and I think I can do it now without looking.
Oh God in hell. I mean, the thing is, obviously, gaming is never going to go away. It's going to keep on advancing. I mean, the one thing that I find incredible is the amount of VR games. While they are stupidly expensive, it does beg the question, how advanced is it going to be to the point where it's affordable? Because if you think about it, game consoles have gone down in price over the years, even though it's only been around not even a quarter of a century, most games consoles, they've gone down like half the price, if not more than that.
Well, because even now, when you were mentioning about like VR and everything, we now have like 360-degree VR YouTube videos as well. So obviously, you need one of those glass things to actually watch them. But even there's the option when you click on it on a YouTube video, and you can move your phone or whatever around like the room and like those kind of things. Like consoles, I think always like kind of remain the same, and like PlayStation, I always say they're getting better, but they're not really. To be honest, they're just getting more freaking expensive, and even games are getting so much more expensive as well. Whereas, oh god, I remember when like begging my mum to buy me like the PS2, and I think back then when it came out, it cost like 300 odd quid, I think, and now you can get it for like £20 on eBay. So, but with like VR, like you said, with VR, if it keeps like progressing and so on. There's even, I think they're going to become available, these pads that you can buy where you kind of strap yourself in and you're physically you're walking in your room, but you're stationary, but you're on this kind of treadmill kind of thing, but you're actually walking around in this world, in this game that you're playing. And it's new stuff like that, which I would love to try out, but obviously if you guys can donate to a PayPal, then that might help.
Link down the below. No, seriously not. But the thing is, it's like, you had Nintendo attempt at the idea of virtual reality with the Nintendo Wii, but oh my Christ, is that a pile of poop?
And like
Because
the controllers barely worked most of the time. They had rubbish charge.
the thing is like they had, because Nintendo was more intended as an American thing because it was to try and get Americans fitter. Obviously, it's calibrated for a larger set of people, to put it politely. So a lot of the time, the calibration didn't always work.
No.
But the thing that I always hated about the Nintendo Wii concept was that it ran itself off the weight idea called a BMI, which is the body mass index, which is the most stupid way to go away about your diet, okay? Body mass index makes bugger all sense
No.
because you can have 5 people, all the same BMI, but they're all different heights, different weights, different genders, different everything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it made absolute no bloody sense.
Yeah, like me, for example, I'm 6 foot. I'm 6 foot and I'm 15 and a half stone. And I've always been like me, and like especially the men in my family have always been naturally quite heavy anyway. I've always been around this weight, around hovering around 14 stone, 16 stone. I've always been hovering around that. That's nothing new to me. So even I am not like obese. I'm not like bigger proportion, shall we say, and I look like pretty much like the scale which I am. But at the same time, when I have my BMI measured, apparently I am morbidly obese, but I'm not morbidly obese.
Yeah,
So the BMI makes no sense.
yeah. I mean, there's also Xbox tried, but I think they just gave up miserably with the whole tracking system with their cameras.
The Connect thing with the green
Yes.
dots.
Yeah. And I think I remember the first few beta tests people tried doing, it kept glitching out because people would stand still, but they couldn't track them for some bizarre reason.
But in that, well, if you can't track them standing still, what hope have you got when they're moving?
I don't know. But I mean, the thing is with VR, it is obviously in the next step forward. You have so many people on YouTube that do gaming videos. They have the whole setup where it's through the goggles and all that. They do walk around the room, but they're a bit limited in terms of the parameters because it's in a room. But if they're on a treadmill or whatever, it's one of those things where does the treadmill also move with you? Because there's some.
It does, yeah. I can't remember which video it is, but I can't remember what this guy's playing, but he's got one of those VR headsets on. He's got kind of like this. He's sort of like strapped into it. He's sort of like got these poles either side of him, and he's got kind of like this thing around his waist
Yeah.
where he can move, but he like won't run away off the treadmill running or
Yeah.
something. And he is completely controlling like the character which he is, which is really freaking cool. Like I've even seen I think it's going to be a new thing in sports as well, VR. So because obviously with like the pandemic and in these weird situations, like a lot of people have had to adapt and change with it. And even I think some sporting events as well. If you cannot pay for like to go to a live show, I think they're doing something now where they can use VR. So a live VR, so where it feels like you're sat in the front row watching. It feels like you sat in the front row watching like a MMA fight, for example, UFC, when really you just sat in your front room.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, that sounds incredible, but I just know if you were to go watch, say, Wimbledon or cricket, that would be a hell of a thing if you just see the ball go, ooh, like scare the life out of you because obviously.
Yeah, and then you end up falling off the toilet.
But the thing is, like, that's the only drawback I can see because obviously they're not worried as much because there's no audience there, so they're only worrying about the cameras, but cameras are more replaceable.
Stupidly expensive.
I don't know. I mean, some VR cameras are within like the few thousands, but then some are like barely £100. Like, it depends on how good a quality you want. But then at the end of the day, it's only 3 lenses or 3 or 4 lenses technically to make it 3D. So it's one of those things where the world is stupidly techie, but it doesn't feel techie at the same time.
Yeah, like a little bit of a side note because I remember when because I remember there was the whole craze about like 3D games going to be coming out. Then that I don't think that ever came to fruition. I don't think. But then, whenever you've been to a cinema and you go watch it and you've been to watch a 3D film, the film doesn't always look as 3D. And like just a little side note, you want to know why? It's because changing the lenses for a 3D film is stupidly expensive for a cinema. Just change the lenses cost probably about around the region of 20 to 30 grand to change the lenses on the camera for a 3D film. So if you wonder why it looks so grainy and like sort of out of focus, even when you're watching a 3D film, it's not because it's not 3D. It's because they can't bother to change the lenses and they're just trying to rip you off.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But thing is, it's like, at what point is it going to get to, say, the idea that virtual reality projection type games? Because most VR is that you have to set yourself up into the world. What if it goes the other way around, where the world sets up around you? Yeah. So it's just one of those things where obviously you need projectors in like at least 4 points of the room, all level. That would take a hell of a thing to set up. Like you'd have to have it microly perfect, otherwise it'd be like you'd have a very wonky world.
Yeah, I can honestly see that. But then, people are going to use VR for some really dodgy stuff, like a certain industry that we won't mention.
Very spicy industry is the only thing I can say. Spicy.
Yeah.
But the irony is obviously that sort of world is more often not what actually helps push things forward to a degree.
Yeah.
Like there are some very, very odd facts that I know. I mean, the only one I can slightly get away with while we're on stream is the invention of eyelash, like fake eyelashes, was actually from a prostitute in the 1800s in London.
Yeah, that's true. It's actually quite fascinating, to be honest.
I mean, the technical term for it, I don't know if I will be flagged for it, is cumbrellas. I kid you not, that is what they were actually intended for. It was basically a way of, yeah.
You could have said something else like camels. The reason why camels have such long eyelashes is to stop sand going in their eyes. So if you're going to put it in the porn industry, have a guess what they're used for.
Well, the more you know, folks. Unfortunately, we are very immature most of the time. But this is what we love to do. We just like to sort of deviate off sometimes.
But making you smarter at the same time. So now you know.
I debate that some days, dude. I think it's more the fact that we sort of educate them in randomness. That's about it.
It's useless knowledge.
It's useful. It's useless usefulness.
Yeah, pretty much. But going back to the whole VR thing, which like the sports industry, like maybe adult industry. But I'm wondering if because going from like the PS2, for example, with like not terrible graphics, but not the best. And then you go all the way up to now in 2021, where I've seen games look nearly like you can't tell them apart from the real deal. So I'm wondering, eventually, are they going to be sort of too real? But obviously, I assume that's what they're going to be going for. But then when it's so real, when it feels like you're actually playing in a real world almost, if that makes sense. I am wondering I hope we'll see that in our lifetime, but it's going to be trippy as hell.
But this is it. Like I think it's called Iconic. Oh god, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Iconic Valley or something along the lines, where something that's meant to be fake is so realistic to the point where you can't tell it's fake. It sounds incredible, but it can mess with your mind.
Yeah. What do they? I think they call that like deep fake, something like that.
Something along those lines. Yeah. But what it would be amazing to have like this concept where, I mean, the thing is, it would make you wonder, like, how can you differentiate between what is the real world and what isn't? Because there was a case I read when I was back at college where this kid had played Grand Theft Auto for 5 days straight, had no sleep, so his brain had succumbed to the whole storyline of Grand Theft Auto, finished the game, still thought he was in the game, went out, tried to rob and stab somebody, and pretty much got shot.
Oh, I remember a story. I think it was Grand Theft Auto as well, or it might have been Metal Gear Solid. I can't remember, but Yeah, this kid got so into like this game in America. Why is it always freaking America? But he got so into this game that I think into Grand Theft Auto, that he ended up taking like his rifle, taking his dad's rifle and going into his mum and dad's room, and yeah. But you know, because I think there was a video by Matthew Santoro. I think top 10 times their video games kill people. It's mental. It is nuts. But it just proves that some people can get so immersed into these games, and if these games get so realistic, is it going to start to become almost a sort of a sick problem in a way? Because I've heard so many horror stories of like game addicts sort of going wrong.
I mean, the thing is, like all things that are deemed addictions, it's terrible, don't get me wrong. But there are ways about dealing with it, and yet a lot of the time they don't really deal with it. It's more shimmied along to the sidelines so that it's like a problem to another point in time. But the thing is, as well, is with a lot of games, they are supposed to be age regulated, but they never stop you playing it because obviously people just get someone else to buy it and away you go. So the only way you could combat against it, and I don't know how well it would work, but you'd have to have some verification, like it scans your driver's license or something to prove that you are the right age.
Well, yeah, because I remember having I remember having GTA. Sorry, Mum, I'm going to throw you under the bus here, but I remember like having GTA San Andreas when I was really young, before I was exposed to any of that kind of stuff. But obviously, you get to the point where like seeing like all this violence and everything from Call of Duty and everything, it just becomes so normal to these kids.
Well, I mean, this is it. Like, it gets so normal to the point where they're just not phased by it. And if anything, they probably want to create more violence just to get the thrill of feeling scared.
Yeah, and they're like desensitized to it almost.
I mean, it's like horror games of old, they were horribly terrifying. Like, say, Five Nights at Freddy's. It
Or
was,
like Resident Evil.
yeah, like, they were very buggy games, but they were terrifying because there was something fresh and new. But obviously, over time, people have got used to the concept, so they don't get scared.
Yeah.
And the whole reason why some people prefer it more than others, it's like some weird thing within our brains where we have the rush of like the adrenaline or whatever. At what point do you have to push yourself far enough just to feel it? It is like a weird addiction, but it's a biological one.
Yeah, although like because of like when I was younger, I didn't have many friends, and I'm still very antisocial to this day, and I'm a bit of a hermit. I don't have very many friends, and I'm happy with that, except for that bloke over there. But obviously, hence why this channel exists. So only a few small circle of friends. But I always play, and I like suffer from bullying at school. So, but a lot of the time, a lot of like other kids, I went to video games because it can be an escape from the
Mm.
real world, as we play video games to escape like our realities and just to fade away for a bit. And I still do that now. If I've ever got like problems, if I'm really immersed into a game, I forget about the bills, all the problems that are going on, or I need to do this, I need to do that. It's a nice escape. And it's actually been proven in surveys and so on, and actual scientific research, that playing video games actually, in a way, makes you smarter and a lot more less stressed.
Because I remember when Nintendo came out with their like brainy games, like the weird like academic stuff, they tried testing it on patients that were Alzheimer patients, and it did help them out because it helps reprogram the mind to sort of not sort of reset, but sort of go back to a state where it does know what to do with itself.
Yeah, and plus
Because
because in some games you've got to make such quick decisions in games and so on, and like there's a lot of strategy. It really does help with your brain.
but it's so weird that not that long ago video games was such a big taboo
Yeah.
because a lot of the times so many different Karens, as I like to call them, and I'm sure lots of people will agree with me
Oh
here,
yeah, like
like to cancel them.
oh yeah, because oh yeah, what are we gonna call them now? Like the Karen and Kevins of the world.
Oh god, you know, there are too many of them, folks. There are far too many of
Oh,
them.
what? Why? What's the like? What do you mean about the cancellation thing?
Well, so I remember when Grand Theft Auto, again, it's always Grand Theft Auto that seems to be the biggest crux of
But
all
yeah,
of this.
nobody talks about Call of Duty. No.
No,
Just saying.
no. But it was Grand Theft Auto. I think some mum in America basically tried suing the company because she didn't like the idea her son had to basically pay off a certain woman and then end up having to dispose of said body and so on and so on as part of the game's logic.
Yeah, but they can't really be blamed for that, though. The game company can't be blamed for that.
Oh, you'd be surprised. A Karen in the natural habitat will find anything to moan about.
I mean, you can't really moan at your kid for killing people in a virtual reality game unless you're going to try and sue Arnold Schwarzenegger for all the people he killed in Terminator.
To be fair, given the fact that it is 2021, it could be any day now. It really could.
Oh, I miss the good old days where like we complained very little and we actually had some guts, but there you go.
Definitely. But is there anything else you want to add today?
Well, apart from how I have just been doing some research on like how expensive video games are becoming now. Like even we're at the age at that point where discs were the in thing, like CDs and so on, and like video games the same way. But now we're getting into the age of where like people are able to download games and so on. So I reckon there's going to be a point where we'll see in our lifetime where discs are going to become the dodo pretty much, because CDs are pretty much going the way of the dodo now. Although vinyl for collectors, that will always stay around, but CDs and discs, like DVD, like as you had VHS, then you had DVDs. Now we don't really have DVDs anymore because we've got streaming services now, even though I still have DVDs. But yeah, like the last DVD I remember I ever bought was, ironically, Endgame, Avengers.
Oh, Christ. I mean, I don't have a lot of DVDs myself. I think I've got maybe 8 at the most. Yeah. And I rarely watch them myself because, one, I don't have a DVD player that works. 2, my PC likes to crash every time I try to watch them. And 3, I just can't be bothered to mess ass about. But it is bizarre, like, the technology has changed so much within 20 years when, like you say, it's so easy to download a game now. But at the same point, like, it's hard to say that you got a game.
Yeah, because
when it's not like somewhere.
I remember saving up my pocket money and everything, and then going down to Woolworths to like buy a game. Does anybody remember Woolworths?
Well, funnily enough, Woolworths might be coming back.
No.
I read it. Yeah, I read an article last year. There was a guy that managed to buy a one-off Woolworths up north somewhere, basically make it his own. But like all things, it starts off as one, and then it can easily like transpire as to further indications of it. But for those of you who are wondering, what the hell are you on about? Woolworths was like this golden shop in the UK. You could have anything and everything for as cheap as chips. They're probably cheaper than chips. I mean, it had this massive aisle of pick and mix that everybody loved, but you wouldn't want to touch it because you knew where everyone else had been. There was about half a shop full of toys, half a shop full of like mum stuff, and then the rest of it was just random other things.
Yeah, it's pretty much every kind of shop that you would need out of necessity was all in one shop.
Yes.
It was brilliant. And although now, actually, that's another point. With CDs and everything pretty much going the way of the dodo now, because I remember, do you remember when HMV was booming?
Yes.
And now, I can only think of maybe 2. There's one in Plymouth and there's one in my hometown of Reading, but those are the only 2 I actually know of.
There's one in Exeter that's still going.
Yep, sorry.
I think there's one in Torquay, but whether or not Torquay won...
No, there isn't. It's not been there for ages.
Okay, so that's another one that's bit the dust.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the thing is, HMV has been around for a very long time. I never knew this till like a couple years ago that I found out. Do you want to know what HMV stands for?
I actually have never known what it stands for.
His master's voice. That's why it's a dog and a record player as the symbol.
Oh, now it all makes sense.
Yeah, I never understood it, but I found it out randomly somewhere. So that, okay. As you do. But...
Yeah. But like even in the music industry as well, like I can't think of anybody who is actually buying CDs anymore. Like, do you remember when we used to have to like when I used to have to get my mum to tape stuff on VHS, on blank VHS tapes to record my favourite shows. So obviously we couldn't record stuff on Sky or anything back then. Oh God, I feel old. So I feel my hair getting grayer.
Don't worry, because it was last year my mum gave me a duffel bag full of CDs. I have yet to go through the entire thing because there's so many CDs. It's about 100 plus CDs. Most of them are now CDs, which is a compilation album thing of like the top charts. But I'm going to make you feel even older. I don't have the copy of it, but my dad still has the copy of it, a cassette of the Hamster song.
Oh God, I remember.
I used to love that song, and I used to put it on every single time I want to miff off my sister. She hated it, but I used to love winding my sister up. I still do to this day, because now she has kids, it's even more fun. But the Hamster song was the highlight of miffing her off because she just couldn't stand it. And it's the most irritating 90s song. But oh my God, was it amazing?
Yeah, it was kind of like the Baby Shark before Baby Shark.
Oh God, yeah.
But like,
yeah.
obviously, like if you got that duffel bag like full of CDs, I would actually love to go through them because it's been a while since I held a CD. But you know, it's just what's the point in buying like 500 odd CDs when you can just have 500 odd like songs or albums just on Spotify at the touch of a phone?
Yeah.
With, you know, CDs, like my mum bought me a CD player, I think 4 years ago, and I'm like, Mum, what's the point? I have Spotify now. Like, there's literally no point. Why would I buy 500 CDs when I can have 500 albums just at the touch of my phone?
Yeah, I mean, it's the funny thing is we we're talking about retro stuff. It's got to the point now where retro looking things have become modern technology. So I have in my living room, which I very rarely use, but I have mini speakers that look like retro speakers from the 1950s.
Ah, yeah, I remember the brownish ones.
Yeah, they look like these. Well, they're made by Bush, which is a hell of a good company anyway.
Oh,
but
yeah.
the irony is that Bush probably made them when they first came out as the original radio speakers. But it's just the fact that it's been 70 plus years. At what point is it going to be that we're going to get boom boxes back again, but like for iPhones to go with?
Oh my God, I love all those boomboxes I've seen. Like, it's only like a little bit of a niche around certain people, but I've seen a few people with boomboxes of sorts. Not like the old school classic ones where you had to carry this big mother effer on your shoulder. You know, those ones. Like, oh God, like the 90s age, like, because we're both like 90s kids, so well, Ben Moore's a 90s kid than me.
Yeah, you young whippersnapper.
Yeah, although I think we're both going grey at this point because we're like in our 20s.
Well, I'm pitching 30 this year, folks. So
yeah, so we have to celebrate Ben's birthday on here, obviously. So, and even just one little last point I would love to mention. Does anybody remember when when like you found somebody who could burn songs onto a CD, we classed them as like master hackers or like master computer geniuses. Do you remember that?
My dad had the entire system on his computer, could do it within an instant. It was amazing. Like he had I think at least 3 disk drives, right? So he would do, because the fact that CDs got better and better at memory, he would have a double disc CD from like the 80s or 70s and burn it to one disc, and it would still have room for another disc to go on top.
I know. Like, even though it's a lot more complicated, things were a lot more simpler back then. Like, such a simpler time. Like, does anybody remember the MP3 player at all? Or does anybody use iTunes anymore?
I still have to, because I still have my iPod 4. I will love it to death because it is the first gadget I ever owned. It is smashed to pieces. Jack's seen it time and time again, but it is my love gadget.
Beat the hell up.
I mean, it's done some miles. It's been to Paris, it's been to London, it's been quite a few places, but it is just the one gadget I will never get rid of.
Yeah, well, that's probably like a lot of retro maybe things like CD players, so on. Like I remember even going jogging with a CD player in my pocket with the headphones, and if you jumped or you ran at a certain pace, it would keep skipping. Yeah.
Oh,
and then to like change the song, you had to take out your pocket, and then you had to press the button.
Yeah, but you had to.
In the arse.
But you could only put it in your pocket in a certain way because obviously the headphone jack wouldn't let you fit it in to your. Oh god!
And like if you didn't have it a certain way in your pocket, it wouldn't play properly either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to have another conversation at some point about like the retro things we used to use, what we can call them retro now. I'd love to have another conversation on that in the future. But thank you so much for listening to us ramble and rave about all things gaming. Much simpler time back then. I do miss those days, but I will never stop playing them.
Yeah, I completely agree. But for this week, we've been ranting about technology. For next week is my topic. And since we had quite a good laugh trying to like rewrite certain movies over the past, one 90s movie that's been on my mind a lot lately is The Mask. And I would love to try and rewrite it as a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't change any of the actors. I wouldn't change any of the characters because it was a hell of a good movie. It had the right cast. I mean, it had some iffy moments like all 90s things, but I would love to try and figure things out in terms of how to make it more of a sadistic horror than it is a wacky comedy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the alternate reality version of The Mask.
Oh yes.
Oh, I cannot wait for this one for next week.
But there we go. It's been an interesting ranty episode as per usual. We just rant about everything really. It's all we ever do on this channel, but it's what we love to do. So thanks for joining us. And again, well, things are lifting slowly. Stay home, folks. Stay safe.
If you don't stay home, at least just stay safe. Just because there's less restrictions doesn't mean there's no threat.
Exactly. So use your common sense. And we'll see you all later.
See you later, guys.